today's edition of Tech Tuesday by Fulton University. Today's discussion, game engines, the software that power video games. I am Luis Garcia, Vice President of Emerging Technologies at Fulton University. We got a great panel today of Fulton University graduates. Welcome. We have Mr. Kerry Allen. He's a senior UI programmer at id Software and working games like Guitar Hero and Doom. And we also have Mr. Ari Patrick, who's a producer at Epic Games and the Unreal Engine. And it seems that that's it for right now. And we're waiting also for our Fernando de la Cruz, our program director for game design. We also have planned for a software engineer, Kris Chen, from Unity to join us. Unfortunately, she had a last-minute meeting, and so we're hoping that we can have Mr. Fernando de la Cruz speak on behalf from the point of view of Unity. So I'm going to go ahead and call your names and let you do a brief introduction of what you're working on. We'll start with you, Kerry. What are you currently working on? What can you share?
Hey, yeah, so I just got done with the team on Doom Eternal. That was a few months ago. So now we've been working on the DLC for Doom Eternal. That's been announced, should be coming out in a few weeks. Yeah, looking forward to that coming out. It's called The Ancient Gods. So that's going to be a good, exciting time. Hopefully everyone picks it up and enjoys it.
Thank you so much. And also we have Ari. Ari, what are you working on?
Yeah, so it's great to be here. I've been working on the Unreal Engine, most recently focusing on areas like rendering some of our special projects and demo showcases that we do. And I'm based here out of Kerry, North Carolina.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that introduction. We will go over some questions for the first 30 minutes, and then we'll go for questions from the audience. All of you that are watching through our Facebook Live, please submit your questions via the comments, and our team will pass those on to us. So we'll dive right in. First, I like to define what a game engine is for those people out there, and so I'll do my best to define it, and we can even discuss whether the definition is correct. But a game engine is a development environment used to build video games. And they provide frameworks for animation, artificial intelligence, collision detection, game playing, and many others. So that the programmers that build video games don't have to program these things over and over again. And some studios build their own game engines, and there are also studios that build game engines for others. So the most popular game engines are Unity and an Unreal Engine, and in addition to some studios that develop their own. So today is an interesting discussion because we have Ari that works in the Unreal Engine, and we have Kerry who works for id Software, who develops its own engine. And so the first question that I'd like to ask, and I'll start with Ari, is why is having a game engine important for developing games? How's your engine different than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think your definition was right there. There are, like, when you're developing a game, there's a lot of interconnected and complex systems, and the whole purpose of a game engine is to try and take care of, like, providing a robust foundation, so you don't have to worry so much about things like rendering, animation, networking, etc. These systems are already kind of put together in a way that you can use that as the foundation and build on top of that, or use it as it exists. And I think that, game engine allows you to spend more time focusing on the actual development of your game, rather than developing the technologies that are those core technologies that are necessary.
How about you, Kerry? Why is having a game engine important for developing games?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think Ari said it very well. There's so many things in game development. It's such a complex field. There's so many problems that you need to solve, whether it's rendering, networking, input. Yeah, there's just so much going on. but it's difficult to be an expert in all of those fields. So if you're just trying to make a game as quickly as you can, you don't really want to have to take care of all of those. And if you use a game engine that's already built for you, all those problems have already been solved by that game engine, so you don't have to worry about them. You can just focus on what makes your game unique.
All right, so Ari, can you explain a little bit, because Epic is a little different in the sense that you guys develop an engine and also develop video games with the engine, and you have a commercial engine, Unreal. How's your engine different than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about that. So I think that there are a couple of pillars that make the Unreal Engine different than some of the other engines that exist out there. First and foremost, I think Unreal Engine is free to use, so it's something that people can download and get their hands on like immediately today. Also, source code is provided via GitHub. So you can go to GitHub and download source code, and you can modify the engine. We have Blueprints, which is our name for our visual scripting system. So it allows you don't have to have a strong programming background. They're basically these nodes. You can build a node graph and drag nodes over to prototype and iterate on functionality without having to require a programmer. And then I think that the other thing which you mentioned, Lewis, is that the Unreal Engine, we use it for our internal projects. So it's something that we dog food, and like we use it to ship Fortnite, we use it to ship a number of our games. And so I think that there's a certain rigor that comes from that that we find very valuable. And then I think like the final point that I'd like to make that kind of separates the Unreal Engine from other engines that exist is that the Unreal Engine, although games is at its core, there are a lot of other uses for this technology. The Unreal Engine is used for architecture and automotive visualization. It's used in film. It's used for broadcast. And so it's really about real-time applications. But game dev is really what's at the heart of the Unreal Engine.
Thank you, Ari. Kerry, you work in a company that has its own engine. How do you think that differs from using a commercial engine?
So one of the benefits to having that is that your gameplay team and your engine team can work very closely with one another. So if there's someone working on gameplay and they're doing, say, the physics of your game, they can go directly to the engine physics programmer, and the two of them can basically collaborate. The engine guy writing the engine side of it and the gameplay guy writing the gameplay side of it, and the two of them can work together. So it is very nice to have your engine team so handy. I work on the engine code a good amount, but I need, like, a lot of times I need help with say rendering or something like that. The rendering guys are right there, and I can go talk to them. Or if I need help with memory management, I can go talk to the guys that wrote the memory manager, and we can work together to make the most optimized and most fun products we can for the gamers.
That's great. I can't imagine how convenient that is to have the guys right next to you. So when we've done some of these other events around gaming, and we speak with panelists, one topic that comes up often is the increase in the cost of developing video games, and the cost of developing a video game keeps increasing, and while the price of video games stay largely the same, in some cases, even when you think about streaming and all those things, arguably it's actually going down. And so can game engines lower the cost of developing games? Is there a reason not to have a game engine? I'll start with Kerry.
A reason to not have a game engine? Only if you've got a very small scale project, or if you're just if you're trying to learn something. Like sometimes if you want to learn how to write rendering code or write networking code, the engine will take care of all of that for you. So you're not going to learn a whole lot that goes on under the hood by using an engine. but for practicality reasons, for actually getting a game out that's high quality in a reasonable amount of time, engines definitely make that a lot more feasible. Yeah.
So, Kerry, still with you, do you think game engines can help lower the cost of developing games?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have to write all that code yourself, you don't have to hire an expert in those individual fields to write all that code for you, then that's all money that you save. And people get familiar with engines. People get familiar with the Unreal Engine. You know, you've got people look for they have Unreal on their resume, and recruiters are looking for resumes that have Unreal or Unity or any particular engine. So, but even with our engine, going from game to game and using the same engine, it's all stuff that you don't have to relearn. It's all stuff that you don't have to rewrite. So it saves you a lot of time. And in business, just time is money. So it's all money saved.
For you, Ari, is there a reason not to have a game engine? And can the game engine actually lower your developing cost?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything Kerry said there. From my perspective, I feel like outside of education or having the experience of rolling your own, it really is a choice of whether you're using something that already exists or rolling your own. It's not really there's not really an option of not having an engine. You've just implemented it yourself, and so I think it really just kind of depends on your project needs as to which way you want to go. I think that having a game engine definitely lowers the cost of making a game. I think about it like a tool set. Like if you have a workshop and you have all the tools available to you, it makes it so much easier to make whatever it is you're trying to make versus if you only have a very limited number of tools available to you. And I think that's the value that comes from having a game engine.
All right, great. So now we have Fernando joining us, and it seems that he had an emergency. So I'm so glad to have you back. So Fernando de la Cruz is our program director at Full Sail for game design. It's a program that actually heavily uses game engines, and I asked him to be our Unity expert today. So Fernando himself has worked in a lot of games, and games for Disney and for Marvel, and before he had a career as an educator at Full Sail University. So one question I want to ask Fernando, to catch him up a little bit, is why is it important to have a game engine to develop a game, and how do you think Unity is different from all other engines? Welcome, Fernando.
Hi, friends, and it's great to be here. Apologies again for being slightly behind the time here, but in terms of importance of having an engine, I mean, all games are made with engines, right? And it just depends on which one you're talking about. Even if you're not using one of the commercially available engines like Unity or Unreal, or one of the other comparable engines that are out there, and you're rolling out your own or you're using a commercially available one, right? So you need an engine no matter what. So in terms of importance, it has to be there, right? We need to be able to draw things to the screen. We need to be able to detect collisions. We need to be able to trigger events. We need to enable designers in order to do some type of scripting, whatever that might be. So it's something that's absolutely necessary. Now, in terms of what differentiates Unity from some of the other engines that are out there, Unity is a pretty mature engine. I think it's a really powerful engine, and one of the things that I love about Unity is how much they allow the marketplace to really dictate the direction of the engine. They very carefully will try not to step on the toes of the folks that are in the marketplace doing a lot of really amazing things to expand on the engine, and only very purposefully and intentionally decide when to actually buy something in the marketplace to integrate into the engine, like they did with recently with Bolt or some of the other things like that. But the marketplace, I think, is very mature. And then the other thing is that there's a tremendous ecosystem of people. People have been using Unity for over a decade now, and there is a huge community and people ready to help you. And the learning resources out there, I think, still are more mature than the other competitors, even though I think that all of the, in particular, Unity and Unreal, I think are both great engines.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you so much. So, all right. So, my first professor of software a long, long time ago, before most of you were born, told me that software was all about trade-offs, and that you do something and then you give up something else. And specifically in the context of game engines, I imagine that there's quite a bit of trade-off that you're making when you're working with a predefined code. And so it begs the question, are there cases in which the standardization of having pre-made code limits the ability to innovate? And can you find an example when that happens? Start with you, Kerry. Just 1 second, Kerry. Okay, go ahead.
Right. So I can think of an example. Actually, I was working for a company called Darkside, and we were using a commercially available engine at the time to make a game, and I was doing the UI for that game. And there was a bug that came in that had to do with the UI kind of speeding up. It got into a really weird state where the UI was flashing and speeding up and going way too fast, and it looked very jarring. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I was looking through all the code I'd written, trying to figure out what this bug was, and I couldn't figure it out. And at the time, outside of work, I happened to be playing a game that had shipped in that exact same game engine. That was I think it was on Xbox at the time, and I loaded this game up, and I was tired because we were crunching, and I actually fell asleep while the game was loading, and it basically stuck on the press start screen, and it was on this press start screen for probably a few hours, and then this bug started to show up in this shipped game, and I was like, wow, this is not something I can fix. If games are actually out there that have this bug in it, this isn't something that I introduced. This is something that is part of that engine, part of that middleware. So sometimes you have to live with that. If you don't have the source code to the engine, you can't track that down. That really sucks. There's also kind of if you're a technical programmer, there's a kind of mindset that you like to get yourself into where you understand exactly what's going on at all times. Of course, no one ever gets there, but we all aim for that. And an engine can black box what's going on. You just kind of have to have faith in the engine sometimes, that it's using the least memory it can, that it's loading things as quickly as it can, and that there's nothing really that you can do to improve it. And just having that faith can be a little bit stressful sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. It reminds me when part of my career, I was doing web applications. And when you're doing web applications, you're not really talking to the computer, you're talking to the browser. And you got to have a lot of faith in the browser.
Yeah.
Can do the stuff that you want to do. And so, Ari, can you find examples in which the standardization of code that gives you the engine gets in the way of innovation?
Yeah, so I think Kerry's example was like spot on. That was a really good one. I don't have I don't think I can come up with an example that really illustrates it more clearly than kind of that example does. I would say another area where I think you can end up with some limitations can be in the realm of optimization. By nature, a lot of engines are built around this concept of trying to provide as much flexibility and as many options to the end user as possible. And what that can mean is that things are not necessarily optimized for your particular use case. If you're trying to ship on a particular platform or your game has very specific needs, it may not be 100% in line with that because an engine is built for the more general use case as opposed to your specific use case. And I think that there's that sort of there's a divide there that, depending on what your constraints are for your project, could be a limiting factor.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not the same example that Kerry was talking about also in terms that if I have a problem with the physics, I can go talk to the guys that do the physics of the memory league with the guys. In the case of a commercial engine, there's a roadmap and solving your own problem doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to find a solution because even if you own the engine, is that correct, Eric?
So I think there are a lot of avenues for getting issues resolved. So sometimes there's like you can rely on the community. For Unreal, we provide avenues for people to provide feedback. And if there's a breaking issue, that's something that we would look into, try to resolve, and then we'd patch that, hotfix that, so that people can get that update and be able to resume their work. So and then I think we also have the case that Kerry alluded to for a proprietary engine where, hey, we're recognizing this issue while we're working on an internal project, and then we can turn to the person next to us and say, hey, this seems to be weird. Can you take a look at this? And then if we do uncover an actual issue as part of that, go and work to bring that change or that fix out to the public so that other people have access to that as well. Yep.
All right, so I guess it's one of the biggest clients. And Fernando, can you think of an example in which a standardization of code of using, in other words, using a game engine actually gets in the way of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I have an example that's similar to Kerry's in that I was working on a commercial engine for a console project, and it was an in-progress version of that engine, right? So that engine had not yet officially deployed for that particular console, but we got basically an early version, and they would supply us with updates every week or two, sometimes twice in a week, depending on what they were fixing. One of the issues is that we technically couldn't run the game on the console yet, and so we were doing all of our testing on PC. We were getting later and later, we were even getting close to alpha, and we couldn't even deploy on the console yet. And so there's a lot of things that we can't test. There's a lot of things that we can't actually verify until we're on the console and have access to everything that the console can do. One of the things, even when we did get on the console, is that all of our levels, which should have run fine, were crashing. Everything was going very, very poorly. And when we contacted the folks at the engine makers, they said, "Oh, we don't have static and dynamic batching of objects yet, so you're going to have to work around that." And it's a feature that is in bonkers standard. It is, if you have 100 coins in a level, I basically pay the memory cost once, and then I draw the same coin over and over again. When you don't have that feature, you're paying the memory cost 100 times, and that basically explodes your memory budget for that particular level. And so they asked us to create a workaround instead of relying on the engine. And when I finished the workaround, the next fix had the static and dynamic batching. So I wasted a bunch of development time working around the issue, and then the next version fixed it anyway. So it's a similar issue that, there are things that are just out of your control, right? And we couldn't even get on the target platform to verify and test and actually take full advantage of the platform. But that was a risk that we understood because, we were working with an in-progress version, and we were able to actually, get started with the project faster than rolling out our own engine for that particular platform, which we hadn't shipped on that platform before. So it was the reward was greater than the risk in that particular case, but it was a cause of frustration, and it was it limited us in some cases because we were really beholden to the engine makers for that project.
That brings up a great segue to my next question, and it has to do with roadmap. And like any software, I imagine engines have their own roadmap of what features they're going to have into the future. And I think it's interesting to understand what goes into that process of deciding what features to add and when to add them. And I imagine perhaps is particularly more challenging when you have an engine that is both internal and commercial, like in the case of Unreal. And but I'll start with Kerry. Do you have any insight as to how is the process of adding features into the engine?
So with us, because the game team and the engine team are based in the same location, we basically just have a meeting. We call the engine team to a meeting and say, hey, we'd like to do this in the game. The engine doesn't currently support it. Could the engine be made to support it? And they'll say yes or no, or they'll give us a timeline on how long it could take to get the engine to do that. It's kind of the same when there's other studios that use our engine. They will say, hey, can we get it to do this? And we'll either tell them no if there's just no way we could do it, or we'll tell them sort of timeline we could get it in. It's probably easier in a smaller group when you have the engine team and the game team working together a lot closer like we do. Yeah, that becomes a much easier problem to solve. Yeah.
Thank you. Ari, do you have any insights as to how is the roadmap put together? You know, how is the process of deciding what feature to add and when in an environment where you guys are also a user of the engine for your own games?
Yeah. I think that there's definitely more complexity that goes into it because you have more people who you're trying to service, right? And so you don't just have your internal game teams. We also have other game teams or other companies that are using the technology, and so we have conversations with them about what are the features that they're looking for, what are the things that they feel that they are requirements for their future projects that they're working on. We look at what the industry is doing overall, and then as I'm sure a lot of other companies do as well, try to predict like, okay, yes, the industry may be moving in this direction, but what is the technology going to be like that's going to be pivotal even further down the road, and then trying to balance all those factors to try and make the most valuable product for everybody. And so there's a lot of balancing of everything and trying to make sure that everyone has what they need. But yep, at the end of the day, I think the process is very similar to what Kerry outlined. You know, making sure that the people who are utilizing the engine that's being made have say in what features and what functionality get shipped.
Thank you. Fernando, you know, with your experience working with Unity, do you know how they decide what features to add and when into the roadmap?
So I don't necessarily have the discussions, their internal discussions, to kind of glean that level of insight. I imagine that a lot of it is very similar to how the folks at Epic make some of their decisions related to the engine. But one of the things that kind of ties back to what I mentioned about one thing that differentiates Unity is that they really do let the marketplace kind of pick a direction for how things about that engine get changed. Except when it comes to things that the marketplace can't touch, right? So if it's something that needs to happen with the rendering pipeline, then Unity will tackle those things, right? So they came out with their dots system, or their render pipeline, or their visual shader language. Those are the things that nobody else can really touch for the most part, and so they will focus on those areas. And if it's something that affects the workflow of how I work with the engine, a lot of the times the marketplace will, people will create plugins to make using the tool better for a particular type of project or whatever it might be. And if something gets popular enough, they will step in and integrate it, similar to how Unreal makes their permanently free collection. Those kinds of things, they will purchase things like Pro Builder, which is a fantastic blockout tool, and most recently Bolt, which is a visual scripting tool. Obviously, with the trend of visual scripting, I don't think that's going to slow down. I think it's only going to expand. And they've mentioned that with the acquisition of Bolt, that they're going to be looking at all of their visual scripting interfaces to try and unify them and make them, in line with what people might expect from using Bolt. So I think that they focus on the things that most of the marketplace can't touch until the marketplace gets so popular, a particular product gets so popular that they have to integrate it automatically.
So we are going to we are about at the bottom of the hour, and we have some very interesting questions already coming from the audience. But I have one more question before we go in, and so we'll do another round, and I'll try to keep our answers to 45 seconds, and so we can get to we got 4 or 5 questions from the audience, and but when is it good to use a ready-made game engine or commercial engine, and when is it better to develop one? Ari, I'll go with you, although your answer may be biased.
Okay. I think when is it good to use an existing engine versus when is it better to develop one? So I think it really depends on your specific use case. I think the best thing to do is, like, even when you're evaluating what engine you want to use, is to kind of think about what it is that you're looking for, what kind of are those core features or core pieces of functionality you're looking for, and then you kind of weigh that against the options that are available. And so I think you would use that same kind of philosophy and look at, okay, it would cost me this many man hours to develop this, but it's available here, but they're missing this other piece of functionality that would maybe cost a different amount to develop. And so I think that's what you kind of look for. And I think that the trend overall is, as things get more complex and you want to have networking that works with rendering, that works with animation, that works with these other systems, people tend to lean more towards, especially if they're smaller teams, lean more towards utilizing a game engine, because the cost for developing and integrating all the systems together can be very, very high.
Thank you. Fernando, go with you. I mean, you work across the board as well. So when do you think it's a good idea to develop your own, and what do you think is a good idea to use a commercial engine?
So the best thing about using a proprietary engine is that you have control over everything, and you don't have to pay anybody, right? Like, those are I think the two probably main things. But the problem is that I think it takes a special kind of nerd or group of nerds, and I say that with the most affection in my heart, to get up in the morning excited, like jazzed about working on engine architecture. And the amount of time it takes to develop our engine architecture is that you don't always get a lot of payoff for what you're working on. It's like you work for a long time before you actually get to see any payoff for that. Whereas with the commercially available engines, you can, on day one of you starting on a new project, you can have some immediate payoff of something that is gameplay related. And it's a powerful motivating tool when you have something that is playable, tangible immediately, versus working for a long time and not having a payoff yet.
But it's a great motivator. Now there's also people that probably are really excited about waking up and solving, how we're gonna have an environment with no gravity. So Kerry, what is your answer to that question? When is you probably also work across the board, and with engines and proprietary engines. So when is it better to build your own engine versus using a commercial one?
So yeah, I say with affection that myself and my coworkers, we are a very special kind of nerd. We all are. We love working on this sort of stuff. We love working on engine stuff. We love working on games. So really, it comes down to time and resources, and that versus money. So if you have the resources, like it did, we have all the people that are ready to work on these things. We have all the specialists, in all the different areas, and so it's just easier for us to have our own engine. And our engine's been built over a very, very long time. So for us, it's been easier that way. But if you're a smaller studio, or if you don't have all the your rendering programmers, your physics programmers, your AI programmers, your networking programmers, if you don't have all those people good to go, then it might just turn out cheaper for you to license an engine than to find all those people, hire them, or teach yourself how to do all those things. Yeah.
Well, thank you. All right, so I have a few questions from the audience that are great. And the first message is pretty exciting from John. What other area applications are game engines being used outside of games? I'll start with you, Kerry. See if you have some examples of in which game engines are being used outside of games.
Yeah, game engines can really be used, well, any sort of visual software. A lot of VR applications aren't actually within gaming, but they use game engines to develop VR, like flight simulators, space shuttle simulators, things like that. There's things like I've seen surgery done with Connect in a game engine, like training doctors, any sort of education. Game engines are good for that. Any sort of film applications as well, special effects, you can do a lot of those in a game engine. A lot of the techniques that are used to make those are the same that film artists, that special effects artists use anyway. They're just done in real time in a game engine now. So yeah, there's a lot of applications. Really, anything, any sort of visual software, you can use a game engine for. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kerry. I'm going to pass on this question to Ari, but before I do that, and I don't know, but I seem to notice that last time I met with folks at Epic, that they were not calling Unreal a game engine anymore, but rather a 3D, real-time 3D graphics environment or something like that. And I think specifically alluding to the fact that the Unreal Engine is being used way beyond gaming. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of applications of this technology in a lot of other spaces. Previously, there was kind of, the hardware was very expensive, and this, the software could not run quickly enough to be able to be used in applications such as film or in other places. But now we're at this kind of like really awesome place where like technology has advanced incredibly in terms of hardware and software, that now we can render, at incredible speeds and at high fidelity, and so you can get really awesome looking characters or really awesome backgrounds in the case of like the Mandalorian, that are rendered in real time. I think just to kind of hit the original question, like I think that there are tons and tons of applications, and I'm constantly astonished by like the new ways people find to use this technology. It's really easy to kind of see the bridge between, hey, this is a game engine, now we can use this to kind of teach people about game development or things like that. But then to see the leap to film, to see the leap to training and simulation, to see the leap to like, I was reading recently about like pharmaceutical companies are using it for a simulation, and it's like not even a thing that ever crossed my mind. And it's really, really cool to see how just this technology existing, people are kind of like flocking to it.
It's so cool. In the case of film, uh, if for those that have the chance to see the Mandalorian or the things of the behind the scenes of it, it's really amazing. There's a shot where you see the Mandalorian with the sun coming up, and that they say that it took him 10 hours to do that shot, and normally it would have taken him days because there's only one moment at which the sun is in that position. And but with the game engine, they could keep it there forever, and repeat and that only is only possible if the quality of the rendering is there, and so Unreal have achieved that. But to extend that question to Fernando, what other areas that have you seen the game engines are being used beyond gaming?
Yeah, I think Kerry and Ari, I think covered a lot of it. But one area that I think I'm really excited about, I think is pretty cool, is architectural visualization. It's a pretty awesome thing. You like when as an industry, when we started creating these game engines, I don't think anybody thought that an industry like architecture would flock to it in the way that they have, especially recently, to visualize our architecture in this way. And it's become popular enough that you've seen these engines completely change their launchers, right? It's like as soon as you launch now, it's like, hey, what are you working on? And architectural visualization is like one of those options of like, hey, if you're working on this, click here, we'll get you started. And I think that's a really cool place. The automotive industry is also using these engines, for similar types of things, but for their industry. Again, it's similar to what Kerry said. If it's a visual piece of software, these game engines are powerful and flexible, and can enable folks to use it in ways it was not originally intended to be used. And it's really, really exciting.
Yeah. So, all right. So there's a great question about the future from Britain. And what are some of the biggest changes you think we'll see in the industry in the next 5 years? And so I'll start with Ari.
Oh man, that's a big question. I mean, I think just kind of looking back at how things were 10, 15 years ago is a good predictor of kind of how things will change. I mean, hardware will continue to get better, and as hardware improves, that means that more powerful hardware becomes less expensive. And then I think we'll be able to do more computations on that hardware, which is why that hardware is significant. And so I think that you'll be able to see like calculations that are really expensive or difficult to do now will become even easier, which means that you can do more and more in the engine that you choose to use, which means that it just opens up the door for even more possibilities. And so I think we'll see a shift towards even more photoreal. Like, I play games now, and my family members will sometimes be like, "Hey, I didn't know the game was on," or something like that, because the fidelity has improved so much over what they were used to. And so I think that we'll continue to see that trend, just like increase in graphic fidelity and processing power, and as time goes on.
Thank you, Ari. I'll go with you, Fernando. What do you think? What are the changes in the industry we're going to see in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so echoing Ari to some degree, I think rendering is a huge. There's always a huge push to improve rendering, right? To increase the visual fidelity. But I think an area that I hope to see a lot of gains be made is artificial intelligence for games in particular. Because it's an area where, while artificial intelligence in the grander sense has had a lot of discovery and a lot of progression, when it comes to games, I don't think that we've seen that same kind of progress as everywhere else. And so figuring out how to take advantage and how to make it accessible for everybody in the engine, I think that in the next 5 years, it'd be great to see a similar type of leap that we've seen in rendering, but in artificial intelligence in the engine in a manner that is accessible, digestible, and usable by all of our creators.
Thank you. And back to Kerry. I think that he dropped out and came right back in.
Yeah.
So good to see you back. So what changes do you think that could happen in the next 5 years in the industry?
So I think we've already started to see things with streaming. We've seen VR. Graphics cards are getting better. Devices are getting smaller. Mobile gaming's taking off. We've got esports, and just all of these things are all kind of growing. And I think they're all kind of converging as well. Like our consoles over the last couple of generations have started to converge. Have started to become the whole home entertainment device. So you get Netflix on your Xbox. I think you can actually run like Word and Excel on your Xbox if you ever wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to, but I think you probably could actually do that. But I think we're going to see them converge more and more, and eventually you won't have a computer, a phone, or a gaming console. You'll have one device that's all of those things, and I think that's the way we're going. We're seeing it more and more, and I think that's where we'll end up.
People have been preaching convergence for a long time, and it seems to converge and then separate again. Every time you get to converge, somebody gets to do a device that by its own does something really, really cool and then breaks it up again. But there definitely has been places in which technology have come and a true convergence and has stayed. So those are really cool answers. I have a few questions that I like to cover, but in order to cover them, I don't think I can do all three of you, so it's probably gonna go directly. So we're gonna go directly to Fernando. It's from Drew, and he liked to, as a game designer, specialize in different areas like game design or level design. Um, how what are some ways in which people can specialize in the different fields of game design to practice and specialize?
It's a huge question, and I'm going to try to answer it as in a brief way that is still powerful for you, Drew. But for me, step one, when I'm trying to get better at something, is to study how other people do it. It's similar to if you wanted to become an artist, how many paintings have you seen of the bowl of fruit? Like people do this because it works, right? It's not necessarily sexy or exciting to hear, but there is a tried and true method of study. So if you want to get better at level design, you need to know what the terminology is, and then you need to be able to recognize that terminology being applied in commercially released games. And as you get better at recognizing that it's being used, then when you go to design your own levels, you'll remember, hey, professionals use these techniques. I should maybe look for opportunities to use these techniques myself. But studying, learning the terminology and then studying and looking for those techniques, I think is the first, most accessible, something that is very low cost and incredibly effective at improving your design vocabulary and understanding.
Thank you, Fernando. I have a question that is specifically for Ari, and how did you get into the role of producer, and what caused you to move in that direction?
Oh, this is actually pretty interesting. So I discovered that I wanted to get into production when I was at Full Sail. I actually did my bachelor's of game design and development at Full Sail. We were in our final project, which is like this capstone project where you get in teams and you're working together to try and build a game, engine and all. And then I realized that I was doing a lot of the documentation work, trying to coordinate things, trying to make sure that all of the programmers on our team were able to focus on programming. And so I was absorbing a lot of the other work. And then I was doing some programming on the side, but my prioritization was around making sure that they were able to succeed and do what they wanted to do. And then I found out later that month, or in a month or so afterwards, that like that's a whole job called production, and that Full Sail had opened up a master's program that kind of focused around that. And so I signed up and did more research around it, and that's kind of how I got on the path of production, and haven't really looked back since. I think it's been a really, really cool experience.
Thank you, Ari, for sharing that story. And Kerry, what advice would you give somebody wanting to get into the gaming industry, right out of school? And a lot of our audience all the time, they're thinking into coming to school or already in school, thinking about, going into the professional, into the industry. What advice do you give somebody, especially in these times of COVID, it being so unpredictable, to somebody wanting to get into the industry?
Well, I'd say that the your entrance into the industry doesn't start when you graduate. It starts way before then. You've got to start networking while you're a student. You've got to start working on your own projects. When you graduate, everyone in your class who graduates with you is probably going to apply at the same places you're going to apply. And so if say they apply at ID, and 10 resumes from Full Sail students come across my desk in one day, and they all have the exact same final project. They all have all the exact same coursework on there. They all have 90% of them. 90% of all the content on these resumes is the same. You've got to have that extra chunk that's going to make you stand out from everyone else. You've got to have your side projects, the things that you're interested in, and also, of course, your networking. You've got to know, you've got to meet people. Don't be afraid to meet people and collaborate with people on projects. Go to networking events and kind of get a feel for the industry in your area, industry as a whole. yeah, just meet people and try stuff. Yeah.
I love that. I really love that piece of advice. And getting into the industry doesn't start when you graduate. In fact, I argue and I tell people the first step to getting into the industry is going to school. Once you're going to school, in a way, you're already in the industry. You already make a very specific choice. And so don't wait until the end to start looking for opportunities. And it's so great that you also mentioned the fact that when you graduate, other people also graduate, and so you have to stand out. There was a question about animation, and I want to ask, any of you guys can answer, because we get very specific about the technical side of what we do. But for the animators that join us today, what is the role of animation? How does animation fit within the production process of creating a game? And we probably can go through everybody, but we can keep the answers short. So I'll start with you, Ari.
Yeah, so I think animation is a super critical part because that's where things come alive, right? You can have the best looking character and the coolest environment, but it's not really a game until things start moving and interacting, and animation plays a huge, huge part in that. And so I guess in terms of like, I just view it as a core piece, the same way we look at any other asset, like or any other attribute of a game, like. All the pieces coming together is what makes the entire game experience. I think that's the short answer, at least.
Perfect. Fernando, do you want to add to that answer?
Yeah,
How
sure.
does animation fit?
So, I mean, animation is such a technical discipline, and animators, I think sometimes people may get the perception that animation, you're pretty hands off. You create the animation and then you hand it off to other people to go do things with. But I think a lot of very successful and capable artists will get into the engines themselves, and they will work on the state machines to trigger the animations, or to make sure that they are set up correctly, imported correctly. They don't feel out of place being inside of the engine, navigating around and being effective and modifying a lot of the things that are already available in these engines to fine tune and make sure that the animation is playing exactly the way that they intended it to play. So I think it takes a special individual to be that dedicated to want to get into these engines and not just create the animation, but make sure that it's playing back the way that it was intended.
That's great. And Kerry, is there anything you want to add in terms of how animation fits within the process?
So yeah, we have a lot of animators at id. There's a whole creative side of making games that has nothing to do with what I do with the programming. But the way I see it, that the code I write is going to be made to look its best by all the animations, all the art, all the sound effects that all the other disciplines are going to provide. And my code really has to do them justice. So it's really, that's how a team works. We're just, everyone is kind of bringing out the best of everyone else. Definitely what Fernando said, jumping in there and seeing what your arts and animation, what your animations look like firsthand, instead of just kind of handing them off. Being more sort of proactive in the role is definitely helpful. The quicker you can work, the more useful you're going to be to the company. So if you can make your animation, get it into the game, see any problems that have come up with it, and then fix those problems by yourself without someone telling you, hey, you need to fix this, that's definitely a good skill to have. Yeah.
Do animators show their work within the engine, or do they show it within videos?
So usually they'll show it within the engine. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so sorry, Ari, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to ask if I could add something real quick.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think Fernando and what Kerry have both kind of hit on is this idea that like building expertise in any tool that you use really is super valuable because it makes you more proficient, and it makes it so that like I think one thing to think about is that like games are always getting more and more complex. Everyone's trying to raise the bar, and so just knowing how to get an animation into the engine is no longer sufficient. People are looking for someone who can get the animation into the engine, but also deliver, how do you have your animations broke up in such a state machine so that you can then have even more realistic animation or higher fidelity there for what you're looking for. And so I think that there are a lot of challenges, and you can look at any discipline, and there are a lot of challenges, technical or artistic, that have to be overcome when you ship any game, because everyone's trying to create the next trying to raise the bar in some way and create new experiences. There are very few people who are just trying to create what already exists and are well defined.
Right, that's great. Thank you. That's great advice. I hope everybody got that. So we're getting to the end here, and this being Tech Tuesday, it always ends with the same question, and it's one of the times that we get very insightful here. But I'm in love with technology and being in it for a very long time, and every time that I continue to be in love, I fall in love again, seeing the things that are coming. So something that excites me a lot is that I've seen technologies that have been in development for the last 30 years all reach their peak at the same time, and which is a very unique place to be, and it will allows us to solve very important problems into the future, and that they were not even possible before. So the way you see it, what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future? I'll start with Fernando.
Starting with me, huh? Um, I to stay on theme, I'm going to say that the way that both I think I'm going to point specifically to Unity and Unreal because those are the engines that I know the most. The way that both of these engines are growing up is ridiculous. When you really think about it, like it really wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was 10 years ago when these engines, I think, were still I don't say this in an insulting way, but a little naive, right? Like they were just they were doing the best that they could at the time. But think of how far we've come in just 10 years with both of these engines. It's the growth in terms of the adoption, the number of people using the engines, and the number of markets that these engines are starting to kind of get their hands into. I don't know that we've seen anything else like it over that short of a time span. So in terms of things that get me excited, it's the growth of these engines. I mean, you have huge teams now working on both of these engines and other ones out there that are trying to anticipate the needs of not just the industries that are currently using it, but other industries where it's not being used yet. And the growth rate, the adoption, how much easier it's getting to use. Like it's, I was excited about this 15 years ago when the idea of middleware, was just getting kind of off the ground. So I mean, I'm doing somersaults now, just seeing how much the engines have grown.
Thank you, Fernando. So, Ari, for you, what do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
Yeah, there are a lot of different things. We've talked about rendering and visual fidelity and things like that. But I think the one thing that really excites me the most is seeing the types of people that are using engines and how accessible this technology is becoming. I see younger and younger people. I see, indie teams. I see more people using technology to execute their visions, which I think is so awesome that to be able to have this technology available such that someone can have an idea and then get a group of people to work together and then release something to the world is super, super awesome. Before, this was more of a closed off method because you'd have to be in a big box store or things like that. Now with the internet, you can put your game just out there and people can play it and people can play test it. And I think that it's really, really cool to see people just innovate and try new things and just dabble with the technology, because that's something that, like, honestly, when I was in high school and growing up, like, that I never had the option to play with these things or learn about that. I had programming classes, but that's about as close as it got. And now I see people picking it up at much younger ages and just like doing really, really cool things. So I think that's really, really awesome.
All right, so Kerry, you get final word. What do you see in technology today that gets you really excited about the future?
Yeah, so I think the thing that excites me most is accessibility. Like, everyone now working on things, everyone now enjoying technology, everyone enjoying the things that I grew up with. I think there's been really good advances in UI and UX over the last, well, 10, 15, 20, as many years as we've had an industry. But, you know, we've seen more and more progress as we've gone along. But the fact that, like, I can give an iPhone to my mom now and say, swipe on this or pinch, do whatever, and she understands what that means. If I'd have done that same thing, if I had given her the iPhone 15 years ago and said the exact same thing, she'd have just stood like deer in headlights, wouldn't have known what's going on. And we've seen it in games, we've seen it across all different types of software. Yeah, accessibility, like voice commands and personal assistants, Alexa, and all of those. You know, we're seeing all these things, all this accessibility. Technology is for everyone now, and it's cool to see everyone embrace it.
Oh, thank you so much. I want to thank Kerry, Ari, and Fernando for taking time of your life today. You know, time is the most precious resource that we all get this access in 24 hours. We're really thankful that you spent one of those hours with us. And for those of us out there watching, I want to invite you to the next Tech Tuesday, and that will be on October 13. That's actually 3 weeks from now. We usually do every other week, but we're going to have a little bit of a break, and we're going to be talking about UX design, the process that brings empathy to tech. And we have a great panel that we're putting together from people from really good places, including gaming and software and web. And so that is on Tuesday, October the 13th. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you later.